Good morning. We'll call our March meeting of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority to order. One item I have is to congratulate Jason and as a new Director of Public Transportation and Parking and the Administrator of the Trust. And welcome to our meetings, and we look forward to your long tenure in this position, and I'm sure you look forward to it too. And we're very happy to have you. One item we do need is a motion to appoint Jason as Secretary of Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. We've got 5 items on the consent docket. If there's any one item that any of the trustees would like a brief explanation or discussion on. If not, I would have a motion to approve our consent docket.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. 2 items for individual consideration. One is consideration of approval of a memorandum of understanding with ACOG, and I would ask Jason to give us a brief explanation of that agreement.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. This agreement that you have in front of you, as you mentioned, is a memorandum of understanding with ACOG. Currently, ACOG has a contract with URS, a consultant that is looking at that's working on the corridor study that ACOG and the RTD are sponsoring. And what we're doing is entering into this agreement with ACOG to basically pay ACOG for the work that they're going to ask URS to do on our behalf in terms of looking at the right-of-way needed for the Santa Fe Depot. You know, there's discussion of potential development of a parking garage to the north of the Santa Fe Depot, just north of Main Street, and this right-of-way study will provide information needed to move further on that development. The funding for this particular agreement is going to be split between public transportation funds and the parking funds.
All right, thank you. Any questions? If not, do I have a motion to approve item A? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Item B is consideration of approval of temporary parking agreement with the State of Oklahoma, or ODOT, or Oklahoma Department of Transportation. Oh, that's right. Debbie was going to give us a brief explanation of that. Thank you.
This is actually the reestablishment of a lease that we've had for years and years under the former I-40. And we've needed, due to the closing of the Century Center and the need to shuttle people, we were needing those extra spaces. So until they start working on the new boulevard, they are allowing us to use that again for parking. So we are right now working with Public Works and getting it ready, filling potholes, we'll be striping it and all of that. So
I remember there was some discussion about the cost of trying to get the lot, or was that the lot where the convention?
No, it's actually the lot. It's the I-40 lots that we're having to repair. Because when they went in and demolished the old highway, they kind of the columns and different things like that. So we've got some potholes and some, some asphalt that needs to be laid.
Do you have an estimated cost of there's no cost for the lease, is there any cost for the repair work?
We're working with Public Works right now. They're going to just charge us their actual cost, labor and supplies.
And how many spots does that allow us?
Well, we're not really sure. It will depend on the striping plan. Before, when we were using it with the highway, or the parking underneath the highway, we had about 428 spaces, something like that. So we're thinking that we should be able to get at least 550, 600.
And the use of that will be probably relocation of Century Center? What's the plan?
Yeah. During the day, it will be for the relocation of Century Center. We'll be shuttling back and forth from the Century Center through those lots. And then we'll also be able to use them for event parking as well. So that's our plan, to recoup some of the money.
And what vehicles do we use for shuttle?
We'll be bringing that to you on the next board meeting. We'll be leasing those from Metro Transit. There's some surplus Metro Lift vans.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Not? Do I hear a motion to approve item B?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. Ratification of claims and payrolls through February 28th. Any items on there that any of the trustees have a question about? If not, I would have a motion to ratify. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Financial reports. We've got the budget to actual for the 7 months ended January 31st, and Jason said he would have a couple comments on that. The interim financial, probably not necessarily any comments, but item A, if you any comments you'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, just a few comments on the budget to actuals. I think I'd start by talking about the transportation fund. That's on, I believe it's page 2 of the report. Just starting with the revenues quickly, you'll see a couple of negative variances on the revenue. The first one there is revenue derived from passenger activity. And I believe we've mentioned this before, but just to kind of keep it at the forefront, we are seeing a negative variance there, and that's due mainly to the timing of our fare changes. When we developed our budget, we had initially looked at starting those towards the first of the year and ended up implementing them later in the year. You'll also notice a negative variance on the federal grant revenue. And again, that's essentially just an issue with the timing of the draws that we receive from the feds. Since this report was finished, we've actually taken another draw, and in February, looking ahead to next month, we'll probably see a positive variance more in the neighborhood of around $300,000. So again, that's just a timing issue there. Looking at the operating expenditures, one thing to mention is personal services expenses. This is something that, again, we've been talking about over the last few months, and as you'll recall, we've been really close on our budget. Some months we've been right at or maybe just slightly over 100% on that personal services budget to actual ratio. This is actually a pretty good month for us compared to prior periods in that we're under that 100%. So we have been able to bring that down. We've been working internally looking at our overtime. We've been looking at some of the standby time that we schedule for operators. So we're doing some things to manage that. However, with that said, we did reach a new agreement with our union, as you're aware, and so a pay plan increase has went into effect. So we're probably going to see this swing back the other direction in the months ahead. But nothing to be alarmed about other than just we've kind of worked our way down a little bit. Now it's probably going to be closer to 100% when we meet and look at this report next month. In terms of the parking division, operating revenues continue to outperform budget. Strong revenues in both transient parking and with the monthly parking. Spend just a little bit of time on the river as well. This is page 4 of your report. I think the one thing I would point out on the river financials is looking at that actual revenue expenditures year-to-date column. You'll see the total excess of revenues over expenditures of about $304,000 on the river operation through 7 months. I want to mention that we have actually received all of the general fund payment into the river operation for the entire year. So we're going to see that number come down as we move forward. And so, again, just to make sure everyone is aware of kind of why we see that overage at this time, that will come down as we go throughout the year. With that, that's all the information or notes that I had. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Back to the transportation, under operating expenditures, the intra-fund transfers to grants management. Kind of a brief explanation of that. And
yeah,
why that number is the way it is.
Yeah, that's really kind of a timing issue as well. In that when we can and we do budget a certain amount to send from our operating budget to that grant fund, which is essentially our local match, and we just haven't made that transfer so far. I think we generally try to make that transfer in January, and we did not do it in January. I think we're going to be doing it next month. So you'll see that.
So the budget is probably correct, we just haven't made the...
Yeah, we just haven't made the transfer, and typically we do it in January. You'll see it in February this year.
Okay. Any questions of any of the trustees? All right, then I hear a motion to receive our financial reports. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Our program reports. Jason said he was going to make the transit system report this morning, so I'll let you do that now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And real quickly, hit a few highlights from the transit system report. In January, our ridership averaged let me back up. With our fixed route operations, our ridership averaged 9,300 passengers on our Monday through Friday service. That's about a 4.7% decline from the previous January. And again, you've heard me mention kind of the challenges some of the bad weather days create for our ridership, and January was no exception. We had 4 what we would consider to be bad weather days in January, where our daily average dropped into the 7,000 range compared to more closer to 10,000, which is what we're accustomed to. In terms of total ridership on the system through January, this is fixed route, paratransit, special services, 1.8 million passengers. It's roughly about a 1% variance from this time last year, so overall ridership is relatively flat. Did want to talk just a little bit about the downtown discovery, because if you'll notice in the table in your report, when you look at weekday service versus weekend service, you'll notice we're a little bit over on our weekday and yet trailing on our weekend service. That's been the trend so far this year. However, in this last month, in January, on the downtown discovery, we did better in terms of weekday and weekend service on an average daily passenger count basis than we did in the prior year. Our weekday service in January, we averaged 184 passengers compared to 180 the previous January. And then on Saturday service, we averaged 259 passengers a day compared to 173 the year before. And so we still are kind of lagging on that Saturday service when we look back to last year, but we certainly gained a little bit of ground in January. Road calls continue to perform well. We averaged 17,800 miles between road calls. That's better than the 13,700 we experienced last year, so we continue to do really well on the road calls. And then in terms of preventable accidents, we had none in January. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Larry, I guess you're going to give us a report on long range and parking, and then the first item on our agenda was a Tiger streetcar planning grant, the outcomes and deliverabilities.
Be glad to do that. Let me distribute the reports and actually get the PowerPoint. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity to try to present the outcomes of the Tiger 2 planning grant. And, most of you have probably heard, I've got a tiger by the tail. Well, I don't mean me, okay? I mean the city in terms of streetcar, in terms of this grant. And I don't mean that old Buck Owens song either, but yet there probably are some interesting analogies there, okay? back a few years ago, Oklahoma City was one of about 120 cities that applied for a Tiger II planning grant, and about a dozen were awarded one. We were one of those cities, and basically it was you might go to the next slide, it was a $378,000 grant, and basically it was to do additional planning around streetcar. The focus shifted more towards planning for sure, and basically we did this work in conjunction with the MAPS office and made sure the MAPS 3 subcommittee was very involved in terms of the progress that was made on this activity. Well, back in early December, we had a chance to submit all the reports to the FTA. There's probably 6 or 7 different reports or so, because if you think of this grant, it's a little bit like a tiger with many stripes, okay? And so really, their review is complete. Back in the early part of February, they sent us a number of questions, but within a day or so we'd answered them, and they were satisfied with all the responses. And so basically, it's a closed matter with them. And so this has really been a good thing. The next slide, you actually get a sense of the types of studies that were done. It's about 8 studies in one. And, I'll cover each of those very, very briefly, but I'd just kind of like to mention that one of the benefits of doing this type of work is that we are able to focus on more than just the Midtown to Bricktown core part that is really the focus of MAP Streetcar, able to go a little bit beyond that in terms of thinking about the future, and definitely about a lot of different types of policies and activities that ought to go on in conjunction with streetcar. So if we look at the next slide, one thing I'd like to kind of draw your attention to is that back in September, the City Council selected what's called the Recommended Route Framework for streetcar. And it is, if you look at it, there's basically that red solid shape 2, or that red Z shape, that's the Midtown to Bricktown core route. And what's anticipated is that phase 1 of MAP Streetcar may still leave $20 to $25 million for phase 2. And if so, then the prospect that could be covered there might be an extension southward towards Union Station, those blue dashed lines that you see, or maybe perhaps the blue dashed line that goes out 4th Street to Northeast 4th and Lincoln. And time will tell, but basically those are prospective phase 2 locations. And going back to the alternatives analysis that that Cotpa trustees worked on so hard, it recommended a much longer system, but we really don't have enough local funds to build all of that. And what was recommended was a system that would run perhaps every 8, maybe 10 minutes during the peak time, every 12 to 15 the rest of the day. So a very frequent type of transit offering. Well, if we move to the next slide, we kind of get to the very first of those different stripes in the Tiger Grant planning process. We had a lengthy economic development assessment done as part of this project. And one of the key conclusions of the consultants is that in that area close to streetcar, you could anticipate that you'd get 4.5 times the amount of growth that would normally happen in that area that's within 1 block either side of the streetcar line. When you go out 2 to 3 blocks, you're going to get probably double that. And that this should be possible with just kind of a modicum of perhaps other types of incentives. But streetcar is definitely something that really incentivizes development and a higher intensity of use. Well, in the next slide, you get a sense of the types of housing and job growth and development growth that could occur within those few blocks of streetcar. To help get our consultants off to a good start, we convened a panel of a lot of local economic experts. And what we figured out is that by the middle of last year, there are already about 2,200 dwelling units on the ground in place in the area around streetcar. By mid-2017, based on what's already really programmed, probably be about 4,362. And our consultants took that sort of information and felt pretty confident that within 10 years of the opening of streetcar, there might be close to 10,000 units very close to streetcar. Tremendous growth. We also had them do a similar type of work for the Core to Shore area and for our Oklahoma Health Center area as well. And, the numbers, pretty dramatic growth, in terms of what might happen with housing, maybe about 1,500 in the Core to Shore, maybe closer to 2,000 in that area between downtown and that, OHC. So considerable amount of growth could occur. Now, this is important because of really the next slide. The idea is that the economic assessment was a way to try to help provide some fuel, some data for the ridership projections. And our consultants really took two approaches. They took the very traditional kind of what I'd call the scientific modeling approach to ridership growth, and they also did something that was also valid, that was based on a comparison to peer cities and the amount of riders per hour, passengers per mile type of an approach. And the next slide actually gives you a little sense of the range that comes out. If you look at Saturdays, for instance, in the opening year, what you'd expect would be an average of about 1,050 to about 2,040 passengers each Saturday on the streetcar line. And by the time the streetcar operated for 10 years, the ridership modelers didn't really think it would double, but they thought it would be 60% growth, something like that. If you would, Jeannie, you might go to the next slide. Livability. Okay. Before I cover that, though, I would just kind of mention that in terms of ridership, there are some things that the traditional science of modeling really can't take into consideration. And those are things like the large number of hotels that have been built downtown. Models can't really pick up on activity that wasn't already happening to a large extent. And since there's probably going to be a quadrupling of the number of rooms and the like, it really can't pick up the idea of the hotel riders. And models have to kind of use the existing ridership patterns and trends, and so it's hard for it to pick up that morning home to work trip. And that's about as technical as I want to get, but with streetcar, with the prospect of a lot of people living downtown, really ridership could be considerably different than what they projected. But we needed to make sure we had a good solid ridership projection for Federal Transit Administration and for other purposes as well. Well, livability. That sounds like a funny word. If you would, I'd kind of like you to think of livability as basically a kind of a concentrated area of town where you have a high quality of life, where things are basically fun, safe, efficient, a lot of opportunity for work. And this focus on livability, these 6 nationally recognized principles, probably part of why we got the grant. They're good, valid principles. That first one about providing more transportation choices. Clearly, streetcar offers a lot of options that really had not been available or previously. And even this idea that streetcar could lead to more streetcar, it could also just lead to more streetcar and bus interface, such as at the Downtown Transit Center, or even this prospect that it connects to other systems, like the Oklahoma Health Center has a large number of shuttles around the health center already. It's very possible that if you could build streetcar to 4th and Lincoln or wherever, you might have a situation where every time streetcar gets to an end of a line, it meets up with one of their bus routes. That could happen at really almost any point in the streetcar system. And without kind of going through all 6 of those types of matters you see on the screen, another one is that whole idea of economic competitiveness. There are certain types of employers around the country and lots of employees who may very well be attracted to a city like Oklahoma City because of the prospect of streetcar. And, enough said mostly about that, but housing be a key, and even things like having an area that's much more ADA accessible, because streetcar will be very handy for people in a wheelchair or people who may have failing eyesight. Streetcar could really add to livability there. The next slide is really just one of dozens and dozens of examples of maps that were done to aid in the analysis. But I'd rather kind of move on to the next matter. That's the health impact assessment on the next slide. Actually, this idea of streetcar could have quite a benefit for healthy community. Not just the idea that more people are walking, but this whole idea that there's there's fewer short trips made in cars, which can really benefit local air quality, and the idea that perhaps streetcar helps incentivize some other healthy choices as well. Even safety, because you'd have a lot more people out from, let's say, 7 a.m. until the end of the day, whatever that will turn out to be, 10, 11 o'clock. You're more likely to have more people out because they've made the streetcar part of their lifestyle, so safety becomes kind of an issue there. But this was, again, the first health impact assessment done in the state, and it was a good project. The final item in the next to final item in the Tiger activity was community outreach. there are about 6 or 7 different types. Aside from that economic development panel, we worked with the MAPS office to convene a couple of Fresh Eyes workshops. They were held a few months apart. 30 or 40 local downtown stakeholders were invited, and they got some education about streetcar, but then they provided a lot of very valuable insights. They were the fresh eyes to the process, and a lot of them weren't involved in the alternatives analysis. Some of them were, so it was a good kind of a blending of ideas. But a really key one to mention is really the second one down there, the environmental agencies meeting. You know, if the city at some point wants to apply for some type of federal capital funds, the federal government's going to ask, well, have you done an environmental assessment? In our case, we haven't, but we've really done the core of that and properly documented it. And so really, there shouldn't be any surprises in terms of anybody claiming an environmental adverse impact. And this was really kind of a good step for jump-starting the environmental process, sort of thing that...
Larry, I have a question about that. So if we were to do an environmental assessment so that we could begin requesting other grant funds, whether it's for this original streetcar or an extension project, first of all, is enough of the environmental work done that it would include an extension area? And then beyond that, how long would the true environmental assessment that would be accepted by the feds, and what would be the approximate cost of that?
Okay. Whenever we convened those agencies, you know, before the meeting and during the meeting, we actually presented streetcar that would be the likely phase 1 as well as the prospective extensions, so they'd know exactly this idea of coming down Hudson or Walker to the Court Shore and all that. So we made sure that they were commenting on not just the route that was the core, but a potential extension. And basically, in terms of is that enough, it depends. You know, in some of the past Tiger applications, they've said you either need to have your environmental assessment or EIS completed, or you need to be able to document that you've made progress and can get it done quickly. And so that's really the part that we've done, because there were no objections, and all the questions that were asked we answered within a few weeks and basically closed the matter. In terms of a cost of environmental impact assessment for a potential streetcar alignment, you know, we'd really need to ask our consultants that, but I have a feeling that that's probably a minimum of a couple $100,000, even for like a 1-mile extension, maybe as much as $300,000 or $400,000. So expensive. Environmental assessment will, if it's just the environmental assessment, customarily can be done in less than a year, especially if work like this has already been done. An EIS could take longer, but we've always been advised that this particular project, it shouldn't warrant full-blown EIS. Right, yeah. Everything's dry downtown. There's no creeks visible anywhere, you know, but there's plenty of urban wildlife. Yeah, so really, but this was a good step to take because it really gave us a good advance notice of whether there might be entities that would consider there being an adverse impact. So it got us ahead in the game, I guess is the best way to put it. So, you know, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of finish out here. The final stripe, as it were, in this Tiger was this idea of the real-time animation. And, you know, you might see that as being, how does streetcar look as it passes through the downtown environment? And, you know, we did this not, you know, to have something that would be entertaining and interesting to look at, because, you know, the city's not trying to convince anybody to do this project. The voters have expressed full support. But it works well as a tool to help model a lot of what-if situations, okay? And it does help people visualize the impact on their property and begin to make plans accordingly. And if you would, I'd like to show you at least a little bit of that. Skyline Inc. is a local firm that's done this work as part of the team. And something that you're really the first to see is our people that are moving. We had them do, you know, this is only it's a pretty short segment, 3 or 4 minutes, and it actually does show how a streetcar and our transit center might interface. At least it shows one concept. So if you like, be glad to show that before we take questions. And I'll try to be very, very judicious in any comments I make, so you can look at that. Oh, I should mention the conclusion here. Thank you, Jeannie. The other thing about good projects come from good plans, and your board sponsored that fixed guideway study, the AA, and that really kind of helped lead to something that could be put out there for the citizens to vote on in maps. And basically, the Tiger II work, all those reports, provided a lot of information, but also a lot of insights. And the study makes a number of suggestions, not policy recommendations that anybody's adopted, but our consultants came up with a lot of good, cogent suggestions about ways to move forward, not so much on the routes, but other types of coordination. And one way to think about it, and I know you're probably getting tired of this analogy, is if you were to think about a tiger that had kind of walked through a muddy field and left its tracks, those get baked in the sun, and so once you come back later, you can still see kind of what was done, what direction was being indicated. And that's really the way all those different studies were. And I think if you look at the end of your implementation report, you'll see those types of suggestions. So if you could, let's look at that animation. This is just going southbound on Robinson Avenue. Skyline modeled the buildings, the trees, the streets to great detail. You see St. Anthony Hospital on the horizon there. This is the new home of the OCU Law School of Central High School. You realize that some of the final routing is, there's still some options about how to do this. That's something that will be kind of looked at. Going past the Survivor Group Memorial to the heart of At 4th Street, it crosses the tracks that would have came from the transit center. So that would be the key junction point for people trying to get off to go down. Yeah, we're gonna do this without the sound. Okay, that's crossing at Park Avenue and going underneath the pedestrian overpass. Going south towards the Cotpa Hotel. Now we're gonna switch to a different segment. Okay, this is actually going northbound on Hudson from Reno. Northbound on Hudson from Reno, past the Myriad Gardens. And under this concept, it's running near the curb, but really with a parking lane in between. That works. Passing by the Devon Tower and the Devon Auditorium. But on Hudson, approaching Park Avenue. City Hall there across the screen. And we're getting close to the transit center, okay? And at that point, you'll get to see how one concept of how people might get off of the bus, walk across the street, catch the street. Okay, here we are, one of our embarked buses, people getting off, walking towards the corner to get across the street, going south across 4th Street, east across Hudson, and you see the streetcar stop there with the yellow tactile EVA strip. Okay, so streetcar pulls up, and watch the fellow there in the wheelchair. This is the flat part of 4th. You know, I mean, where to have a stop in that location is kind of key. Do you want it on the hill on 4th or on the flat part of Hudson? So you see him getting on, the door closes, streetcar takes off. And you see the transit center catty-cornered from that stop. Okay, this would be eastbound on 4th Street, approaching Robinson. And Robinson, under the route framework, oh, lost something there. Oh, good. So passing Robinson and about to turn north on Broadway. And there's only about maybe 60 seconds left of this flip. turning north on Broadway. This was done, I think, on a Sunday morning. You don't see a whole lot of cars, but streetcar will work well in traffic. Coming north on Broadway, this is at 5th Street here. See the downtown skyline back, and it's 6th. The next part's in Bricktown, okay? Coming east into Bricktown, just under the railroad tracks. And what we want to kind of show is this whole matter of off-wire operation, going underneath that underpass. The pantograph, see that thing on top of the structure on top of it is raising up to reach the wire. There are definitely parts of downtown where wire will be operationally impossible. And so with this little segment, you get not just a sense of where streetcar might be, but a lot of its relationship to other parts of the urban environment. So I'd be glad to try to answer any questions.
Will you be able to share that video to the public before too long?
Yes, sir. I mean, we really wanted you all to see this and the reports first,
Sure.
And the full route is actually available, but we just didn't want to show it. But yes, we should be able to release it pretty soon or have it available in other ways.
That's great. Thank you.
Is it possible for us to get a look at the complete animation somehow online, maybe?
Yes. I think really the plan is that we'll post this short version and then the entire version as well, and make it available to have some presentations done in the public, because there can be a lot more interaction than just seeing a video. But yes, we could do that. The thing we're not really showing you is the part of the animation that shows how it might look and work in the Oklahoma Health Center on Phillips Avenue. And there's other things that, for the sake of time, just not a way to show.
I do think we should be careful about what we do with the piece that's not funded right now, that we don't get that out there with the expectation that people think we're building that right now and are disappointed.
That's a great point.
And I know, we don't know, technology is ever changing, and even though we have the wires, I don't know that that's ever been definitely predetermined that that will be the method of the streetcars.
You make a very good point. This idea of modeling areas that wouldn't have wires versus ones that would, is something that can be done going ahead. But that's a good point. There probably be lots of areas where there wouldn't have to be wires if the technology.
I know when we had the open house at the station over here, I don't even remember who I visited with, but had something to do and said that the expectations yet are there's just several technologies still out there, and we don't know the exact form of how this is going to work, whether it will be wires or it will be wireless or something. I don't know when that time comes to make that determination. But
Larry, we finished this grant up, or we're finishing it up. What are the next steps, and when would we see construction start?
Well, the next steps in terms of the grant is really to try to implement some of the types of suggestions and recommendations, work with folks. As far as the timeline for construction, the MAPS office is really continuing to work on that schedule. Design is really start next year, but construction is really, there won't be any construction until probably early 2016, maybe late 2015, but we're quite some time away from that. And it could be that at some point might want for David Todd or someone from the MAPS office to come and provide some briefing on that. There's just a lot of operational issues, and that's maybe a key place that Cotpa will want to put some emphasis, is to be on the lookout for operational issues that really are going to be important as this is being designed.
Mr. Vice Chairman, certainly that's, as Larry mentioned, that's something we can work on. We can coordinate with the MAPS office and potentially have them come in here and kind of give some more details about the construction schedule and where they're at, if that's an item of interest to the trustees.
I think that would be really helpful, especially to get the discussion going, too, about wires, no wires, that sort of thing. And some of the things that this board would be interested in if, in fact, and I'm assuming, but if, in fact, Cotpa will be the operator of that.
Do we take a vote on that now?
I don't think we
Oh,
can.
okay.
I'm not an expert, but I think Robert's Rules of Order says it's
Oh,
not
okay.
on the agenda.
Any other questions, Larry? All right, thank you. That was really interesting. We appreciate that. And that has to tie into the long-range plan because it is a little long-range off. All right. Parking.
As you'll notice in your packets, not much has changed from last month as far as occupancy and those items. We're still, we're right at the 121%, still pulling them in somehow. Don't ask us how. We are. So just to kind of update you on some of our construction activities, the Arts District Garage, which is just outside the door, to let you know, they are working on the 6th floor. The elevator lobby concrete was poured on Wednesday. And you'll notice on the east side and on the west side, they're about 2 floors higher. So they're on the 8th floor working on the steel and the forms for the east or west elevator side and stairwells. So we're coming right along. Again, like I said last month, weather has not really been our friend. We can't pour concrete when it's below freezing or single digits days, so we're just working through that. Santa Fe project, it's hit little snags, some bumps, but we're still working with them. They had one of their subs went out of business, so the contractor's being diligent and trying to get that going again on the glass. And I'm working with them as well, so I'm expecting that to be finished within the next month or so. We did have it surveyed. We'd had a lot of problems on the sidewalks in front of the retail space, so we did recently just had it surveyed since we're pulling all that out to make sure that we get rid of those, drainage issues and things like that. So that's really what all that's left is to finish 2 storefront. We got like 1 panel of glass that needs to be finished, and then the sidewalks on that west end. And they've already painted the lobbies and the elevators. Most of all, that's all been finished. So it's almost there. They've installed some lights. I don't know if anyone's seen the new lights, the barcode lights on the inside. It's really not nice. And then they'll also be installing this week the outside lights that will light up the barcodes on the outside of the building at night.
Then you had some discussion about new elevators in there.
Yes, the board approved that last board meeting, and we have not had the specs yet, but we'll be probably bringing that to you for the release for bid, or RFP. Let's see, shared walkers the same way. We've got the specs on that. We'll be probably ready to release that as well. Century Center, our big one. Century Center notices went out to all of our parkers 2 weeks ago that we will be temporarily closing that on March 24th. That is to allow the work that needs to be done. We have 3 contractors in there involved, and we just felt it was the best for our parkers as far as safety and concerns just to close it entirely. We had thought that we could phase it, but it was just impossible.
And how long will that be closed?
Probably for at least till October or November, as far as the garage part of it. I'm sure they'll still be working on maybe the outside and some other stuff on the retail area.
And how many parkers is that?
It's about 500. And so with the lease, approval of the lease today with ODOT, that was our plans. We'll be shuttling those individuals. They did receive a letter notifying them that, and we'll be Republic will be running the shuttle. Right now, our plans are to run it from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., and we'll be using 4 vehicles, 4 each morning, and then running it down, less vehicles during the less peak time. So.
Do we anticipate any impact on the revenues with that?
Yes, because we are giving them a reduced rate because of the shuttling and parking outside. So yes, and that was figured in our projected budget.
What's the rate of negative revenue residual of this thing?
I'm sorry?
How much do we lose?
How much do they pay at Century Center? It's about $100.
How much will the system lose as a result?
Oh, I don't have those.
Rough estimate is probably about $290,000. The Parkers will continue to pay, like Debbie said, a lesser rate, and that lesser rate is really covering the cost of the shuttle service. So we'll have those expenses covered, but we will see. Keeping in mind our parking revenues based on our last budget to actuals are over target, so this will start to erode that a bit.
And we're also working with some of our long-term, contract parkers that we had in trying to move them into the other locations. So, we're doing some shuttling of some of the accounts as well.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
I just want to say, Debbie, that it has not gone unnoticed, at least by me, how much effort has gone into the relocation and accommodation for the Century Center customers, and I just wanted to express my appreciation for that.
Thank you.
I think it's important to know that we go above and beyond to try to accommodate our parkers, and that there's certainly a difficult situation created by our high occupancy rate, difficult for our customers, great for our revenue, but I appreciate the work that you've done to make that happen. I'm sure at this point you're thinking you should have gotten your certification in construction management or logistics instead of parking, but
Right, that's true. Thank you.
Quickly before you leave, the 500 folks that are being displaced in this process, there is some sort of mechanism to apologize to those folks, a card. I'm thinking in terms of the public relations involved in keeping those folks happy with the service that we provide for them and the future service that we can provide for them. You understand what I'm saying here?
We'll be looking at that, especially on the shuttles. I'm working with Republic on doing some extra customer service efforts and things like that for those customers. Yeah.
although I do think a reduced rate helps with that quite a bit, a reduced parking rate.
All right, our marketing and customer relations is what we were just talking about.
Good morning. Have a pretty full report, but wanted to just call one item out. Was a recent conversation that we had in restarting some discussions about student passes with OCCC, and then just how they can tie into the technology that we are looking at implementing over the next 45 days or so. They're very excited about the new route system that we have in place. They're getting more service, and that's extremely critical to them as they continue to grow their building and campus. But the way to do that, they have to eat up parts of their parking to do so. So that means less parking, and they need more transportation options. So they're very interested in tying into the technology and providing real-time information throughout the campus, not just at the bus stop, but then also looking to provide more convenient ways for students to purchase passes and or integrating somehow eventually a system in which the boarding and the bus and everything like that is taken care of, whether through just a tap card or through their ID. We're exploring the various ways that could happen, but they're very anxious to get started with that. And then pretty much we had a recap of our technology updates yesterday at the Transportation Committee meeting, and everything right now is on schedule. We're looking to launch with the new routes, with the caveat that if we run into any snags, that we don't want to deteriorate any possible public trust with any technology issues, so that we may have to delay that just in the event that something does come up, but nothing's anticipated at this point. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
The call center, you look at how many calls went in January and February. What are most of the questions? What are people?
It's typically, where's my bus?
They're at the They're
They're at the stop.
at the stop.
Or
and
on their way
wondering
to
where
the stop. So they're on a cell phone, they're on some type of mobile device, and it's typically, where's my bus, where's it at? Or it is trip planning, or just general questions while they're on the bus. Can I get a connection to this other bus? Can you go ahead and have them hold the bus for me? Kind of question.
Our
How close
understanding is that this is all going to, the complexion is all going to change with the rollout of the digital part of this entity, right? That those folks won't have to call somebody and say, hey, where's my bus? They'll be able to go online. It actually won't be an app. I'm excited about it. It won't be an app. They'll be able to go online and see exactly where that bus is, how far away from them it is, and I think you said yesterday, or someone said yesterday, is they'll be able to step in out of the rain and be able to step out as the bus pulls up, get on their bus, and move on in a positive kind of fashion. I think the rollout is just exciting to me.
Yeah, long term, we hope to see some of that call volume decrease over time, but we don't anticipate that happening in the near future, especially with the changes. We actually expect an increase in call volume in the next couple of months, and probably will stay through up to midsummer, just until people are comfortable with that part. And then it's a real challenge or an opportunity for us to educate the riders on the technology and how to use it, because until they use it, become comfortable, and then learn to trust it, much like adding a new route, you're not going to see that ridership or that acceptance of that technology until it's been proven.
Do we respond to the calls pretty quickly? I mean, we have adequate staff, or?
We continue to struggle with that. We do lose a significant number of calls every day on a monthly basis, and that's simply because the volume is so high. But we do, the average call time is around 45 to 60 seconds. So they're not lingering on the phone very long, and just, having a chatty conversation. So they're getting to each call as soon as they can. But the thing that hurts us is, like any other department or organization, is when you have sick time and they're in a closed environment and they all get the same thing, and then they're out together. So we're continuing to identify ways that we can alleviate that stress on this call center and provide even better customer service.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you. River.
Good morning.
Morning.
We have water.
We have water.
Last Saturday at 12:30 p.m., the eastern gates were closed. We began re-impounding water. Public Works began re-impounding water in the eastern basin. As of this morning, it was about 27 inches low, which is very, very good. It should be full in time for our St. Patrick's Day cruise on March 17th, which is selling very well. As I mentioned before, the River Romance cruise in February was our best selling of that particular event ever. Staff is preparing for the 2014 ferry season. The ferry service begins April 2nd. That's a Wednesday. That service will run between Regatta Park and Exchange Landing. Then beginning May 7th, we will make the run down to Meridian. Our season preview party will be Sunday, May 3rd. We have lots of live music, some food vendors, some games and activities. I believe there will be a large painting where patrons can come and participate in the painting of a mural, that sort of thing. Our historians from the Oklahoma History Center will be there to inform people about their activities on our ferry service. And for charters, we already have 23 charters booked for this year, which is a very good number for us. That's very encouraging. Looks like we're going to have a good charter season this year. And that's all I have for you, if you have any questions.
The charter rates they're not in here, doesn't look like.
No, it's become, we prefer that people call. It's one of those things, if you get a chance to talk to them and explain what the services are that's available, the variety of services that are available with a charter, it's very difficult to get that on a 1/3 page. When people call, we, of course, inform them the charter rates start at $3.75 per hour with half-hour incremental charges. There are also charges for setting up a bar, if you want some type of live music as opposed to Sirius radio. It's just a very a la carte type of menu for charter service and very difficult to condense down to a single one-third page.
Have we worked out our problems with the canal, Bricktown, and connecting and under the railroad? Or
we're very close.
Very close.
They're very happy with what we have provided. You know, they gave us the temporary permit back in December so we could run some charters back then. The issue still to be resolved has to do with the pedestrian access on the sidewalks. I spoke with legal Wednesday evening, and they anticipate if the pedestrian access is not resolved that they will acquire for us a temporary permit for the waterway access so that we can use that. They do anticipate a resolution sometime in April, though. I did also yesterday afternoon speak to some of the hoteliers out at the Meridian Corridor and spoke to them about some of our services and what we have offering, and they're a lot of new activity, a lot of new hotels going on down there. The new Meridian landing improvements are beautiful. If you haven't been down there to see the new sidewalks and the landscaping, it's all very nice. There's another new hotel which will be right next to our landing. It's called a Home 2 hotel. It's an extended stay, family type hotel, which will have a patio that basically looks out onto our landing. And we keep in touch with those folks on a regular basis. As long as our dams are functioning, which it looks like we should have a good year this year with that, we should be able to then begin to try growing some more of that business out in that direction.
Good. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Do I hear a motion to receive our program reports? All in favor? Any items from any of the trustees? Come on, Jason. I mean, Rick never shut up, so I don't know if you have I don't know if you have to close and have something to say, but okay.
Well, just to keep the tradition going, I guess, I guess I would like to take a minute and just say that, I'm very grateful and looking forward to serving in my new leadership role for the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. I'm very excited about the opportunities for public transportation and parking in Oklahoma City. Very appreciative of the leadership of Mr. Kane and the trustees that have really got us to this point where we have these opportunities in front of us. And, also looking forward to just continuing to work with our staff. We have a great staff here at Cotpa and our city employees, and so just certainly looking forward to it. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. And welcome aboard. So, all right. Our meeting's adjourned.